Welcome everyone to Cover Letter Best Practices for Remote Jobs. And welcome back if you have been here with us before for one of our previous webinars. While we are giving everyone just a minute to get in and get settled, please feel free to share with us in the chat section where you're joining us from. All right, before we dive in, I'm going to cover just a few housekeeping items and just make us all aware of a couple of things. Number one, my name is Doug. I am one of the coaches here on the FlexJobs coaching team, and we are delighted to have you here with us today. This webinar is going to last about 45 minutes with a brief Q&A time at the end of the webinar. We also want to just kind of make you aware, don't feel as though you have to take furious notes. This webinar will be recorded, and a link to the video as well as the resources that we share in the presentation will be sent out within about a week to the email that you used to register for today's event. If you don't happen to see it, be sure to check your spam folder. Sometimes the things can end up in there. Also, please note that this presentation has been pre-recorded, but the Q&A section that follows the presentation will be live with one or more of our coaches joining in at that time. If you have a question, please put it into the Q&A section of Big Marker, not necessarily the chat section. Don't put it in the chat section. The chat section is a great place for you to interact with others that are attending the webinar. However, if you have a question for the Q&A portion, go ahead and put it in the Q&A section of Big Marker. That's where you want to put those. This really helps us to keep track of questions in one place. And the Q&A section also allows you to give it a thumbs up, click the thumbs up, if there's someone else's question that you are interested in having answered. And that way, it helps us to know which questions are the most popular. As mentioned, one of our coaches will be live in that portion of the webinar to answer questions that come in. We probably won't be able to get to everybody's questions today, but I can almost guarantee you that you're going to learn something today. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So here's a quick overview of what we're going to be covering today. And let's read through this. Why you absolutely need to write a cover letter. Now, of course, since you're here at this webinar, you're already likely aware that there is some importance to cover letters, at least to some extent, but we will talk about that in more depth. The second thing is we're going to cover cover letter formulas, and we'll also share some helpful samples that will give specific insights for remote jobs. We're going to talk about some things to avoid when writing your cover letters. And then, of course, the end, we'll wrap up with an audience Q&A. So let's start with why cover letters are so important. Well, let's be honest here. Writing cover letters is not a ton of fun. And I'm sure there are times when, when all of us have skipped cover letters because it's not required, perhaps. We want to warn you, though, that by ignoring the submitting of a cover letter, it can actually hurt your job search. Some companies won't even look at a candidate if they don't submit a cover letter. And here are some stats on the screen regarding the importance of including a cover letter when applying for jobs, just in case you're perhaps a little skeptical yet as to why you really should include writing a cover letter each and every time that you apply. So let's just read through these stats here together. 83% of hiring managers say a great cover letter was enough to grant an interview to a candidate with a less than perfect resume. So let's just say that perhaps you're a candidate whose resume doesn't quite have, the required experience or quite the skill set that's listed within the job application. or the job posting. Or maybe you've had a break in your career due to caring for some children, or perhaps a relative, or perhaps you were part of a layoff, you went back to school, you were focusing on getting some certifications, or any other reason that might leave some kind of an employment gap within your resume. Or maybe you're newer to a field and trying to land your first job in a specific career field. Your cover letter may help to create an avenue into an interview, even if you have a resume that isn't perhaps the best match for a job. Let's look at that second statistic. 77% of hiring managers expect a cover letter, even if they're optional. And yes, I know that seems a little ironic and perhaps feels a little unfair when it's not listed as required that they can actually expect to see a cover letter. However, that really can be the case. And then that last statistic there, applications with cover letters carefully tailored to individual job descriptions yield over 50% more interviews than job applications submitted without one. So when you carefully tailor that cover letter, it can really be a great benefit. So let's be honest, writing a cover letter, like we said, it's not a lot of fun. There are times we're all tempted to skip writing and including them, but if you're tempted to skip one, I just encourage you, keep these stats in mind. They really are important. If you feel you don't have, say, the energy at a specific time to do the cover letter, stop your application, give yourself a break, and come back to it when you feel maybe a bit more energized. Sometimes it's just, it takes walking away for a bit to clear your mind and come back fresh. You don't have to necessarily apply for a position immediately after you find it. And of course, unless there is a close date on it and you happen to be on that close date, it's really better to take some time, even perhaps waiting a whole day if you can, to gather your thoughts and craft your cover letter when you feel a bit more, say, energized. Think about it from the hiring manager's perspective. How would you decide between similar candidates? Would you interview someone without knowing a little bit about them or their personality or their writing style? If you're trying to decide between two candidates who bring similar qualifications and similar qualities, to the table, the one who took the time to provide a cover letter is providing additional details about themselves that the other without the cover letter is not. So be that person that submits a cover letter. It really can help you. So let's talk a bit about why writing cover letters can still be helpful, even if the hiring manager doesn't read it. Writing a cover letter requires you to really focus on why you like the company and why you're a great fit for the company. When writing a cover letter, which we'll dig into the details in a little bit shortly here, you always want to dive a little deeper and research the company and explore their mission, their values, their goals for the future, any newsworthy events about them or items that you can find about them. Taking time to focus on these things, even if no one ever reads your cover letter, can significantly help you prepare for a job interview. So it helps you write out answers to questions that you're going to likely face in an interview, such as, why are you a great candidate for this position? Or why did you apply here? Or what are your biggest strengths? Going through the exercise of writing, the cover letter, in writing these things out can really help to do a few things. Number one, it can help you to clarify to you why you're a great candidate, which provides some, great starting points for you to use in an interview for these types of questions. Number two, it helps to get you very clear on your biggest strengths for this one particular job. And three, it helps you make a connection with, how you fit with the company's value and their culture. So think of writing your cover letter as a study session for interviews. You're going to gather your thoughts as to why you're a great fit. You're going to make, the connection between you and the company's values, and you're going to determine your biggest strengths that align with this position. And once you write it out and you see, that you're a great fit, it becomes easier to do cover letters like this. And then it will become easy as well to talk about those things in an interview process. So once you've found some companies and jobs of interest, it's important to position yourself, in the best light that you can in your remote job application. And that's what we're going to talk about and teach you here. There's really no science to crafting a cover letter. Quite honestly, it's a bit more of an art, but there are some formulas to follow that can really help you craft an engaging cover letter. And so let's begin to talk more about that. So let's begin by looking at, we'll call it the first rule of thumb. And let's start to read this slide here. Write the cover letter like you already know the person you're writing to. So kind of get your mind in this set. Pretend that they already love you. Pretend they know why you're great. Pretend they're already interested in hiring you. So you see this, it's pretend, pretend, pretend. Your cover letter is really you reinforcing all of that. This helps to put you in a positive mindset so that you can write your cover letter from that point of positivity. And then read that last one. Pretend they asked you, what inspired you to apply for this job or this position? Why, what are your big passions and your dreams and goals? And hey, do you have any ideas that could help us do things even better around here? So by getting in the mindset that the hiring manager already likes you, they like what they've seen on your resume, they can already see how you're going to be a good fit in their organization. It helps reduce the pressure that we put on ourselves. Instead of like a fear-based writing, we write our cover letters with a much more positive mindset. And so that's really the first rule of thumb in our formulas as we begin to write our cover letters. Now, what should we actually include in our cover letters? Well, much like any other part of job search and your job application, your past experience is going to carry a lot of weight. So if you've already done some remote work, and you've got that under your belt, make sure that you call attention to that in your cover letter by showing that you've already worked successfully in a remote environment. You'll prove to an employer that you've got the suitable skills and that you can navigate kind of through the various dynamics involved with not working side by side with your coworkers in, say, a traditional environment. Some of you might be thinking, well, what if I don't currently have any remote work experience? And I would say to that, don't worry, don't panic. It's okay. Instead, move on to the next tip, which is include relevant skills for your remote work. Even if you have, some experience under your belt, it's really a good idea to shine the spotlight on some of the most relevant skills that you bring. That you have. Think through some of the skills that are needed to work successfully as a remote employee, right? You might be thinking of things like communication and time management and organization and self-motivation and technology. Do you possess any of those or all of those? Find ways that you can work those into your cover letter, and that will help to show how you can be a good worker. Bonus points, really, if you can include real examples of how you've used those very skills to make a difference for past employers. Also, consider emphasizing any times when you've spearheaded projects or worked independently, when you've taken work home on the evenings or the weekends, you've worked on volunteer or freelance projects at home. Any of these count as remote experience, and so add them to your cover letter. So here's an important thing to remember. First and foremost, employers care that you can not only do the job, but that you can do it well. And so that being said, that's why it's really important to spend most of your time focusing on the value you can provide for the company, as opposed to what they can do for you. I know this can be a temptation at times. Some of us have done this, but quite honestly, I just want to encourage you, resist that temptation to focus on what you'll gain and turn your attention to what the employer is going to receive. The more you can use your cover letter to outline the value that they're going to get from hiring you, the better off you'll be. With that in mind, study the job postings and make sure to note how your qualifications match their biggest needs. Comb their website, their job postings, social media, and look for their values, their mission, their vision, and then draw comparisons as to how your values line with theirs. For example, I was excited to see that you have a high value on whatever that might be. I too have a high value on that same thing. Of course, you're always going to need to remain polished and professional, yet it can be helpful to let a little of your personality shine through in your cover letter. Employers want a solid understanding of who you are, and that's really tough to ascertain sometimes from a generic cover letter. So allow some warmth and some personality to come through in your cover letter. Cover letters used to be much more of a formal thing in nature, but we're going to give you some tips in some of the upcoming slides on how to warm things up a little bit there in your cover letter. And then answer any questions or provide additional information that's required. This is very important. It's a very important step. Many companies do this so that they can rule out people who don't follow directions. For example, they may ask you to write like the job title in your cover letter, or give a salary range, or put a listing number in the first paragraph, or maybe please start your first paragraph by saying something, whatever they put in there. As I mentioned, this can be a test, really, to see if you can simply follow instructions. If you don't follow their instructions, you're likely going to be overlooked. And any information that would help them understand your situation. For example, if you have an employment gap, if you're relocating, if your location right now is different than the location they're requiring, but you're planning on being there eventually, take a sentence or two so that you can help them understand and get past any unique situations that you may find yourself in. Okay. So let's dive more into some formulas for writing a cover letter. Reviewing the job description. Sometimes we can find really important information within the job description, and you should definitely take time to review the job descriptions. And we're going to do that here with this sample. So let's take a moment and review this sample and look for clues to help us look for what we might want to write in our cover letter. If you'd like, you can type some of your answers in the chat box. So as you read the job description, what do you think are the most important things to add and to include? And what skills might you have that are in here? Go ahead, take a moment and put those in the chat. So yes, we can see here from the slide, things like chief of staff and organizational skills. They're looking for somebody with leadership and experience working with C-level people on special projects, and people with presentation skills and that have managed teams of at least 3 people. I also want to draw your special attention to this. Did you note the last bullet? If a candidate reads a listing too quickly, they may hit the high points but completely miss that last bullet. Let's read it. To apply, please include, I am the best chief of staff in the first sentence of your cover letter, or your application will be disqualified. Be sure to read job descriptions for directions like this. This is actually real. This is taken from an actual job description. So for example, you might say, I would like to take a moment to tell you why I'm the best chief of staff for this position. So this is just one example, but be sure to take your time reviewing job descriptions, not only for key terms and phrases, but also for specific directions as well. So we're going to look at the salutation. So we're going to talk about that for just a second here. This is the opening greeting portion of your resume. You know, in the past, resumes used to be very formal. We would start with dear sir and madam and to whom it may concern. And things are a little more casual, a little bit more friendly now. If you're able to locate, you know, a specific person to address it to, that's great. Do that. If it's dear Miss Johnson or Mr. Jones, you know, whatever it may be, if you're able to address it to the person, that's best. If you're unable to locate the specific person, say on LinkedIn or their website or the job description, then you'll want to avoid those to whom it may concern salutations, and use one of these like dear hiring team at, or hello Acme Corp marketing team, or dear finance hiring team, good afternoon customer service hiring team. These sorts of things, you can base it on a team or the department that you're applying to. If it's a committee that you're going to be interviewed by, then go ahead and address it to them. And if it happens to be a very small organization, then you can address it to, say, the entire organization. Okay, so let's look at some specific examples. And here's some examples of introduction paragraphs. Now, we really recommend to have a strong intro paragraph reflecting some warmth and enthusiasm that kind of quickly gets to the point of why you're a great candidate. So let's read a few examples, and we'll just kind of read bits and pieces of some of these. I'm writing with great enthusiasm to apply for the position of commercial loans operations senior manager at Citizens Bank. Watch this. With a wealth of highly complex operational experiences within the banking industry, including risk mitigation, change programs, data stewardship, regulatory requirements, and commitment to outstanding customer service. You see what this person is doing here. Note all the keywords. This person noted the qualifications straight from the job posting, incorporated them right into that paragraph. But I also want you to notice that it doesn't feel real forced, because the sentences and the content around it are a bit more natural. So kind of avoid, you know, looking like you're just repeating a list. This next one, when I read your job posting, right, for that position, I immediately was struck by how much this position sounded like me, and I'm thrilled to apply. I find myself becoming more energized the more I read about your company and this particular role, and I'd like so on and so forth. Do you see this? In this particular one, we see a lot of warmth. We see a lot of energy. We see enthusiasm communicated right away in this example. And so that's another really great approach. And then this last particular one, as a dedicated customer service leader, I'm extremely excited to submit my application for this position at Spectrum Charter. One of the most important factors, and this is what I want you to see, is attracting and retaining customers in the development of high-performing customer service and call center teams, and that's exactly what I hope to do and develop and lead here at Spectrum Charter. So this person took their understanding of the company's need and tied their enthusiasm to meet that need. Okay, so the body of your cover letter really should be about 2 to 3 paragraphs, and they really shouldn't be too long. We're talking about 2 or 3 sentences per paragraph. It's my encouragement to kind of avoid long paragraphs with multiple sentences, you know, 4 and 5 and 6 sentences. Reflect and expand in this area on what you bring, how you'll be a fit for the company. Include quantifiable information if possible. You know, this is where you can kind of look to your resume and not, you know, type it back in verbatim, but draw examples and highlights from your resume and pull them into here and showcase a couple of them, 2 or 3 of them within your resume. So in this first one, look at this. To be clear, I'm not seeking another job. I'm seeking an opportunity that will allow me to combine my, what is this, passion for rehabilitative space, deep operations, hands-on doer, leading, growing, mentoring, high-performing operational teams. So note, this includes keywords, and even though it's kind of short and direct to the point, it does cover a lot of ground. So this particular one was from a career changer who really wanted to try to explain how their passion connected with and their the experience that they would bring and the transferable skills. That second one right there. So from my experience with household brands, to the unfamiliar, and the common thread throughout is knowing the overreaching goals of the organization. They talk about some things, but now look at this last sentence. Most recently, my efforts at Gilson Farms led directly to a 20% cost shipping reduction in a single year while driving 100% plus growth in revenues year over year. So you'll note in this one, in this paragraph, that there's some very effective quantitative information. And this can be very powerful, very good to include in your cover letter where you can. And the last thing I want to note here is in this particular last paragraph, there's this bulleted format, and that can be a great option to catch a reader's eye, to break up information and make it very readable and easy to find that information. And last but not least, the final piece is the conclusion or the sign off to your cover letter. And here's some conclusions and examples for us. The main point of the conclusion is to thank them for their time and reiterate your interest and mention those next steps that you're hoping for and tailor it to the tone of the organization. Some organizations are going to be a bit more traditional, perhaps formal, that type of a thing, more conservative in their nature. So something like, thank you for your time and consideration, sincerely, so-and-so. It could be, a good way to wrap up your cover letter for something like that. Things like many thanks or best wishes or all the best can be seen as a little more casual. So bottom line, kind of tailor your tone to the sense that you're getting about the company as you read through the job posting and research. Do your research about them. So the general idea here is to communicate those things, and you can see from those examples on the screen, they are pretty, short and to the point, but capturing that information about, your interest, moving forward, thanking them for their time, and so on. So capture that and make it straight to the point. Very good. Okay, and lastly, we're going to talk about some things that you're going to want to avoid in your cover letter. So the first thing is cookie cutter approaches. While some basic parts of your cover letter can be used for several jobs, don't send the exact same cover letter for each application. Really take a moment to address your interest in this specific company and this particular job. And this is really, kind of what we've been driving home throughout the entire webinar is that, you want to tailor that cover letter to those people, that company, that job. Avoid being long-winded. Strong cover letters avoid just repeating a resume over again. It's important to keep the language personal and yet in kind of a succinct and direct way. Avoid inappropriate humor. Exhibiting humor that's in poor taste is really not a good idea in pretty much any situation, right? But it can be particularly harmful in a cover letter. You want to avoid the possibility of offending a hiring manager in this or in any way. Loaded words and phrases, things that are self-promotion in a not a good way, right? Certain words that can be, or phrases that can be a bit of overkill, such as saying, that you're the perfect person for the job, or being too picky or demanding, unless they tell you to write in there that you're the perfect person for the job, then of course you do that, right? So just kind of be careful with this though, kind of loaded words, loaded phrases, and double check and double check and double check and double check your spelling and grammar. Unfortunately, spell check doesn't always catch everything it should. So reread that. And even if you can, have a friend or a family member read through it as well, because sometimes we can miss things that we thought we would have caught as we proofread something. But, just of course, reread and have someone proofread that for you as well. Okay, action steps. Let's just review these. Write a cover letter for each and every application. Include relevant skills and experience for remote work. Connect your experience and skills to their biggest requirements, the people that you're applying to, their biggest requirements. Strike a warm, friendly tone when possible. Answer any questions and requests from the job description, and proofread before sending. Okay, so as a reminder, a copy of this recording and the resources that we've talked about is going to be emailed out within the next week, and watch for that in your email. If you don't see it, be sure to check your spam folder just in case there. For even more tips and tricks and resources, we just recommend that you go to flexjobs.com/blog. There's a bunch of resources there that can be very helpful for members and non-members alike in their job search. And now let's open it up to questions. Please remember, put those questions in the Q&A area rather than the chat section, and feel free to give a thumbs up to anyone else's question that you'd like to have answered, so that we know which are the most popular questions. So now, with all of that in mind, we are going to go to our Q&A.
Okay, well, this is Doug, and even though I was the coach who recorded this, pre-recorded the presentation portion, I am also the coach who will be joining you live for the Q&A time. So it's good to be with you folks here again today at one of our webinars. If you would be so kind, would somebody mind just putting a note in the chat section, letting me know that you can hear me? If you would do that, please. Just say, can hear you, Doug. I can. Great. All right. Thank you very much. Good. Well, we will assume that folks are hearing me, and we're going to jump into our Q&A time here together, see what we can learn together. Okay, let's look at this top question that says, does the cover letter, like the resume, also go through ATS? That is a really good question, and I'm glad somebody asked that. For those who are here that may not be familiar with ATS, or Applicant Tracking Systems, is a keyword software that a majority of hiring managers, recruiters, companies are using to manage their applications. And what can happen, certainly does happen with an ATS, is that it will scan your resume looking for keywords that are within their job description of qualifications that they have for the position. And they will grade your resume based on the keywords that are contained or are perhaps not contained in your application documents, and in some cases can just entirely screen you out from consideration. So it's really good to be mindful of ATS and cooperating with that as much as possible. The answer is that yes, they can. An ATS can. Now, they may not always set that to scan your cover letter as well, but it can scan your cover letter, certainly in many cases, right? So if you can, let me give you just a quick insight into this. Oftentimes companies will weight certain words. And so if you see something in the application material, the job description, where it's bolded, it's repeated multiple times, they're saying this is, a definite qualification, you need to have something of that nature, they may actually weight that to look for that word to appear in your application documents, your resume and cover letter, 2 times, 3 times or more, something of that nature. So if you can work those words into not only your resume, 1 or 2 or 3 times, but also, if it's really important, work that into your cover letter as well. So I would definitely encourage you to tailor the cover letter, because ATS can scan that for keywords from their job description as well. One other note about that I'll throw in real quickly here is if you are applying to a position and you have the opportunity to upload one document, it doesn't give you the opportunity to upload two documents, say a resume and a cover letter. What you can do is you can copy and paste your cover letter within or into your resume document. However, you're going to want to make sure that when you do that, even though it seems a little bit, I guess, counterintuitive, you're going to copy and paste that as the last page of your resume. So your cover letter gets included. However, the reason that I say that is that ATS will oftentimes grade or weight the first page of your document and the keywords contained therein the most, so that is kind of the most important page in many cases, is that first page, and that's oftentimes where the majority of your keywords are going to be, is in the first page of your resume. Okay, next question. What about customizing the executive summary section at the top of your CV resume? The consensus here in South Africa among hiring managers and recruiters seems to be that cover letters are just adding to the paperwork nightmare. They would rather that an application comes without a cover letter and that the executive summary is tailored for each application. That's a good question. Now, I completely understand that there's a lot of voices with a lot of different opinions and different ideas and approaches, and I'm not discrediting any of those, right? I can understand that, boy, sometimes in this whole job search thing, it can be like, my goodness, what is the answer, right? And the truth is that we're dealing with a lot of individuals that approach things in different ways, not just career coaches and resume writers and industry people, but the hiring managers and the recruiters there themselves. So I know that can be a little bit, confusing. The point is, yes, your executive summary, your professional summary, your profile, whatever you call that, at the top of your resume should indeed be tailored for each application, and be very clear about your qualifications for that particular position. The point is that the summary section at the top of your resume is to have, concrete information about your skills and your background that's applicable to them. Your cover letter is really a different purpose. It's not the same thing as your summary section. It's, as I was talking about in the presentation portion, it's really an opportunity for you to be a little bit more personal in nature, to connect with that hiring manager, with that recruiter in the midst of perhaps hundreds of other applications, and in some cases maybe 1,000 or more, who knows, depending upon the position, of other people that are applying that may have very similar backgrounds, and the cover letter can be that opportunity to connect. So now, regarding the consensus that you mentioned among hiring people and recruiters and hiring managers and whatnot in South Africa, I appreciate that perhaps it might be that way there. You understand, number one, we're kind of dealing with global hiring. It's not uncommon to be finding jobs outside of our own area, and so things could be different. But I will also note that those sorts of statistics sometimes are across the board. It could be that as much as perhaps 50% of hiring managers don't read a cover letter. However, I'm going to caution you with this. I know of hiring managers who feel the exact opposite way. There are hiring managers that if your resume is not accompanied by a cover letter, they won't read your resume. And so the point is we don't really know. And I certainly understand that it's extra work to do that. However, personally, if I were applying, I wouldn't want to take that chance, right? That perhaps I'm going to be applying to somebody who is of that other percentage, who believes, goodness, I want to see a cover letter accompanying this resume. And, it would be really too bad, right? If you were a candidate who had all the qualifications, you were a perfect candidate, and the person decided not to read your resume simply because there was a cover letter not attached. And I just would, I would hate to see that happen for people, right? So yes, I'm a strong proponent of including them, regardless of whether some may read them or not. Okay, some companies only allow one cover letter and resume to be added to the candidate profile. And then when we apply to the role, it just submits the profile. If we apply to multiple positions at the same company, how do we best go about writing a letter, since it does not allow a new letter for each application? Yes, and I get that. There are times when that's going to happen. And in that case, if you're applying for very widely different roles within the same company, that certainly can be a challenge. If your positions are similar, if you're applying for project managers at the same time as somebody who leads some sort of operations or that type of a thing, if there's some similarities, certainly try to do your best to create a general cover letter that is general in nature of what type of role you might do, highlighting your key skills and those transferable things that you're bringing in, while still, and you can do that in general, while still being very purposeful about researching the company and noting things in your cover letter that are strategic about that company. Maybe some sort of a corporate initiative that you really are excited about, or perhaps a value that they have as an organization that you align with. And so you may only be able to load one cover letter or resume. I completely understand that. But in those cases, still try to make a connection with that hiring manager and use that cover letter to be personal and targeted towards that company. Let them know that you're interested in working there. I recently reviewed a role that noted certified public accountant track preferred. I have no desire or interest to pursue a CPA. Should I just move on or put together a compelling cover letter to sell my skills? Here's the way that I would approach that is, it's going to be different for different companies. And we need to, of course, put that caveat in there. Some people may really feel strongly about that, a CPA accountant track. However, there's definitely a case to be made that a lot of job descriptions, in essence, can be wish lists. I know of people who have applied to positions where it said bachelor's degree required, and they did not have a bachelor's degree, and not a problem. The hiring manager saw the skills that they brought. They decided to interview them, and the interview went great. They were engaged and hired them, right? So job descriptions can be a bit of a wish list. There are at times where there are people, if they would apply to a position that had everything that they were looking for, they might already be a bit overqualified for the position, right? So I want to not only to discourage you, but to encourage you. If you don't meet all of the criteria of a job description, still apply, because they still may consider you based on some of the things that you bring. Now, that all being said, if this is something that that is very important to them, it could be, I don't know that, but this is something where I would suggest applying. And then in an interview, have a dialogue about that. Say, I don't at this time have any plans to do this. Can you help me understand, why this is an important piece to you, right? Or perhaps just ask that question first. Why is this an important piece? How do you feel about that? And then you can feel that out and determine, okay, I understand you don't have any desire at this time to pursue that, whoever is asking this question, but you're going to want to probably find out more information. Don't disqualify yourself before you've had an opportunity to talk to him, though. Apply and see if you might have an opportunity to interview. Let's see. We've got time for maybe one or two more really quick questions. I need to explain a 7-year gap. Do I do that in the body, 2 to 3 paragraphs, or do I do that in the closing paragraph? Any examples? Okay. What I would do is, number one, you're going to want to include something to note and explain that career gap in your resume as well, because oftentimes ATS systems will scan your resume, career gaps or dates, gaps in dates, especially 7-year gaps, may send up a flag and it may downgrade your resume. So I would first address it in your resume as a career break, active career break, intentional career break, planned career break, whatever describes your situation. Put it in there with the dates to and from and to, and a bullet just describing what happened. 7-year intentional pause to relocate geographically and care for a ailing family member or something of that nature, if that were something of your circumstance, right? So address it there. Then additionally, when you come to your cover letter, I would spend the first paragraph talking about your excitement for the company, what you learned, and 2 or 3 key things that you bring in that first paragraph, maybe first in 1.5 paragraphs, and then explain. Not necessarily in the closing. I wouldn't wait that long. The closing paragraph is really going to be recapping your interest and and looking for and asking for an interview or follow up. First, address your excitement for the company in your cover letter, address some of the key skills that you bring, and then briefly talk about that break in your career and help them to briefly understand what happened there. My goodness, there's a lot of questions coming in here, and I'm so sorry we're not going to be able to get to all of them. We're kind of at our time here today, but I really hope and trust that you were able to learn something today about your cover letter and moving forward with that. I tell you what, we always appreciate you folks joining us for these webinars. And we are also very grateful that you're part of our FlexJobs community as a member here. That's great to have you be a part of all of this. On behalf of the coaching team and the rest of us here at FlexJobs, thanks for joining us and all the best to you in your job search. Have a great day and bye now.